We have prepared 5 lectures for you. The theme is brain health and nutrition. And tonight I have the pleasure of having my colleague, Dr. Emily Wong, and my esteemed colleague, Kelly Morrow with me. Our presentations would be 1 presentation per month, starting tonight, each month on Thursday. The dates will be shared with you guys. 3 of the sessions include interactive cooking. We'll be sending the recipes to the attendees. So you will have a chance to cook with our chef, Chef Jared. And at the end of the session, you will have a meal for the night and we'll all enjoy eating our meals. Delicious. He's an excellent chef. And the other 2, the first one is tonight. Dr. Wong and Kelly will be teaching some pearls to us regarding how to protect our brain and what we can do regarding nutrition to protect our brain and optimize our brain health. And in the other session, Kelly will be helping us with planning food and nutrition for optimal brain function. So as you can see here, these are our esteemed presenters for today. Dr. Emily Wong, she goes by Dr. M actually. And she's affiliate associate professor, Department of Medicine at UW. And Kelly Morrow, she is a registered dietitian and nutritionist. And next slide, please.
Dr. M, it's your turn for your slide deck now.
Okay, so sorry. So before we get to your slide deck, I think I would like to actually read your bio so people get a better understanding of who you are. So I start with Dr. M. Dr. M, or Dr. Emily Wong, she received her undergraduate bachelor and MD degree at the University of Washington. She completed a specialty training in internal medicine at UCLA and went on to specialize in women's health. Dr. Wong completed her executive master's of health administration degree at University of Washington and a fellowship in integrative medicine at the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona. She served on the faculty of the UCLA Department of Medicine and maintained an affiliate associate professor appointment at the UW School of Medicine. She currently teaches in the Li Kongxing Faculty of Medicine at the University of Hong Kong. Dr. Wong was the principal investigator for the UW Center for Excellence in Women's Health. It is a US federal grant, was awarded with the intent of advancing the health of underserved and minority women and to promote the leadership of women in academic medicine. Dr. Wong served in multiple business leadership roles, including Associate Chair of Clinical Affairs in UW Department of Medicine. She was elected by her peers to serve on UW Physician Board of Trustees and Chief of Medical Staff at UW Medical Center. Dr. Wong is Fellow of American College of Physicians, Diplomat of American Board of Internal Medicine, as well as the American Board of Integrative Medicine. She completed integrative health and wellness coaching training at University of Arizona, and is board certified by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching. She's also a certified coach through the Life Coach School. Her passion is to help women to unleash their brain's full potential through the application of neuroscience, psychology, and self-care. Thank you, Dr. Wong. Kelly Morrow is a registered dietitian nutritionist and fellow of American Nutrition and Dietetics. She has been on the faculty at Bastyr University in Seattle since 2002, where she has supervised clinical rotations at the Bastyr Center for Natural Health and taught in the Department of Nutrition and Exercise Science, Naturopathic Medicine, Midwifery, Acupuncture, and East Medicine. Kelly has been in private practice since 2000, and has previously worked at Evergreen Hospital in radiation oncology, the Booth Garden Parkinson's Center, and in community health promotions. Currently, she sees patients at Seattle Integrative Medicine. As a nutrition educator, Kelly helps people learn about how food affects health. As a nutrition counselor, she helps people with motivation and making sustainable changes while supporting personal preferences, lifestyle, and culture. Kelly uses an integrative, body positive, gender affirming, and non-diet approach to health. Thank you, Kelly. Now, before we start, I would like to take a moment to thank Dr. Emily Wong and her family for providing the funds for Cha-Chi-Ming Funds at the University of Washington. And it is in honoring of your great uncle, if I am not.
Grandfather, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for providing these funds. And the funds are intended for education in internal medicine. And with that, Dr. M, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I am so excited that there are so many of us here today who are here to learn more about our brains. So I am excited about all the brains that we're going to be able to help today, and hopefully, get you guys going in terms of this brain health series, which I think is just an incredible opportunity just to get everyone together learning about cooking. And of course, we all love food. And so, yeah, what a great opportunity. Thank you so much, Dr. Iman. I'm just going to start by supplementing Iman's wonderful introduction. I'm wanting to just share with you that in addition to all the things that he said about me, so I'm Dr. M, I'm a brain health coach, integrative medicine doctor, and all of that, but I am also an artist. I am an artist and I'm a creative and I am an author. I write a blog, which you're welcome to check out. And I also am a family caregiver. And it's in my role as a family caregiver for my grandmother and for other family members that I came to know about brain health and brain aging diseases. And I came to be motivated to take care of my own brain, my family, and really basically everyone else that I can bring along the way as I learn more about brain health. This is a picture of me with my grandmother. Sorry, I'm just going to take a moment here because she's in the hospital right now and she has COVID, and she's 104 years old. So her name is Luby Ju. She is Cha-Chi-Ming's widow, and she means a lot to me, obviously. She's here with my daughter. This picture was taken maybe more than 10 years ago. And you can see that, and my mother's here on the far right. And there's this term we have in Chinese, which is, it means having 4 generations in the same hall, which is just such a tremendous blessing. And this is how I feel. So I'm gonna just move on here. I just want to say that I think that when we take care of our brains, we're taking care of our whole families. So what are we going to talk about today? So this is an overview. We're going to talk about brain health. We're going to talk about dementia and Alzheimer's and how do we prevent dementia. I'm going to talk to you about the Mom Your Brain approach, which is my own way of approaching brain health. And then we're going to have Kelly talk about nutrition for brain health. And excuse me. And what I wanted to say about this is that really, this is one approach, right? There's many, many, many different approaches to brain health. And so I would love for you just to keep an open mind and recognize that there's no one way. There's no one way or right thing that you can do for your brain. This is an iterative process, meaning that we are all going to figure out our own path and our own journey and what works for us. And the most important thing I want you to take away from this is to trust yourself, right? Trust your own instinct for what's going to work for you. And don't necessarily be like, oh, this expert says this or this expert says this, because we are all different and you know yourself best. And that's one of the main approaches that I use, is to teach you how to know yourself best if you don't feel like you do know. So I'm going to start just by talking about what brain health is, right? So there's 2 components to brain health the way that I see it. There's kind of the now and then the future, right? So the now is this part at the top of this kind of like little pyramid here, right? And now is kind of how well is your brain working, right? So all these things we think about when we think about how our brains are working, right? When we think memory, attention, processing speed, right? These are the domains of brain health, right? These are the domains of cognitive function, right? And then beneath that is our mental health, which I think of in terms of emotions, which drive our energy levels. And then there's our physical health, right? And without our physical or mental health, our cognitive function is not going to be, optimally working well, right? And then underneath that is the future, right? And so that's what we're really here to talk about today is how do we protect our brain, right? Because we are all prone to brain aging diseases. We are all prone to aging. That is the goal, is actually to get older and not to die young, right? And so how do we prevent degeneration? How do we build cognitive reserve? That's really what this is about. And what I want to say is that a lot of times it's hard to think so far in the future about protecting our brain. But if you can pay attention to how you're thinking now, how your brain is working for you now, how your energy levels are, how your emotional health and physical health are now, right? If we're taking care of our brains now, then that is going to actually help us prevent future injury to our brain as well, right? And a lot of that has to do with kind of like being able to trust what you're sensing in your body, whether something's working for you or not, okay? So I also want to just share this concept with you that I think about all the time, which is that, we have a mind and a brain, and we tend to use those terms interchangeably all the time, right? But to me, I like to think of the brain as being this very fragile organ that's really a collection of billions of neurons, right? And there's the central nervous system connection. It connects to our spine, our whole body. There's synapses, tissue, so on, right? So there's this sort of very fragile organ that's in this, skull, and there's all these layers of protection, right? And then there's our mind. Our mind, right, is where our thoughts and feelings are, where our memories are stored, where our stories are, right? And it's our soul and our spirit, our identity, right? And what I want to suggest to you is that while the brain is an incredibly fragile organ, when you come right down to it, right, it's just a massive gelatinous fat and fluid and, cells and things like that, right? Our mind is the most incredibly powerful supercomputer in the world. So if we can harness the power of our mind to take care of our physical brain, that's actually our most powerful weapon, the most powerful weapon that we have in our arsenal to really take care of our brains, right? And here's the thing, our minds are incredibly powerful, but they have the potential to cause harm as well as to do good, right? So I think of this all the time too, right? The mind is a good servant, but a bad master. And what do I mean by that? So what I mean by that is that sometimes our minds don't want to face up to something that, is stressful for us, or that we're afraid of, or makes us frustrated or angry, or we feel stuck, right? And so a lot of times, we may go into these buffering behaviors, right? I call them buffering because they're really numbing out. They're kind of like an escape, right? And so sometimes it's watching Netflix, right? Or we may beat ourselves up. We may criticize ourselves. You can do better, right? We can imagine the future, catastrophize or worry, right? These are all ways that we are really kind of creating what I call a toxic environment inside our minds, right? Or we can shift our energy to focus more on these behaviors that actually help our brains create more of a beneficial environment in terms of neurochemistry, right? So reducing the cortisol levels, reducing the adrenaline, right? And bringing up dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, right? So we're really kind of trying to make a more sort of beneficial cocktail as opposed to a toxic cocktail through things like exercise, eating healthy, sleep, right? Journaling, meditating, right? So this is really kind of like the basis of the Mom Your Brain approach. And the third thing I want to say about brain health is that brain health I think of as being the sum of all of our health. Right? I call this the everything bagel of brain health. So for those of you who are fans of the Everything Everywhere movie, right, with Michelle Yeoh, right, I think of the everything bagel because it's kind of like, if you think about our mental health, our gut health, cancer prevention, sugar, blood pressure, heart health, sleep, right? All of those things add up to our brain health. But it's a bagel because strangely, there's this hole in the middle of the bagel because we don't really talk about our brain health per se, not often, right? Starting to see more articles about it, starting to see more books about it, but we don't typically talk about it very often. And that's curious to me because we talk about all the other components of our health, but somehow not so much about brain health. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. So I'd love to have you put these in the chat box for me. What are some of the reasons that we don't talk about brain health? I can tell you, I live in Hong Kong and we're in this, Chinese culture. And I want to say that in the Chinese culture, there's definitely a stigma against mental health, right? So we don't talk about mental health because it's kind of like, oh, that's not good if something's wrong with your brain, right? There's a fear of judgment. There's a fear of maybe loss of face or respect if there's something wrong with your brain, whether it's a mental health problem or whether it's dementia or any kind of problem, right? And we don't feel that way, same exact way with physical health, but somehow with mental health, there's more of an issue, when it has to do with your brain. And then I want to say that we also have, even though a lot of people, think that Asian cultures really revere, the elderly, and we really do, there's also this ageism. And I think that's true of all cultures, really. And we are ageist against our future selves, if you think about it, right? So we look at the elderly and we think of them as being disabled or weak or somehow less than, right? And so I'm on a campaign to stop the shaming and the stigma here when we talk about brain health. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about why we don't talk more about brain health. Okay, so next we're going to talk about dementia. And what is dementia and what is it in relation to Alzheimer's? A lot of times we use the terms interchangeably, right? And it's probably because Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia, right? So if I look at the word dementia, right, it really refers to this condition where we have memory loss, confusion, maybe some personality changes, but it's caused by a number of different diseases that we've identified so far. There's probably many, many, many even subtypes of Alzheimer's dementia. But currently, what we're calling Alzheimer's dementia accounts for either 60 to 80%, depending on what study you look at. And then there's vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, frontotemporal dementia, right? And what I want to say about this is that actually, it's not so much that these are pure categories, right? Oftentimes there's a mixed picture. So more often than not, we'll see a mixed vascular dementia with Alzheimer's dementia. And think of vascular dementia as being like either strokes or mini strokes, where there's like clogging of the arteries that can injure your brain, right? And so when we do things for our brain health, oftentimes we're not just looking at that one disease, we're actually looking at mechanisms that may be potentially interacting with each other to cause injury to the brain. Or if we take on these preventive behaviors, it can help the brain in multiple different ways. Okay, so coming back to this idea that our brains are fragile, right, and prone to injury, what are all the different injuries that can happen to our brain, right? So there's all these things on the left-hand slide here, behavioral or contextual factors that have been linked to dementia, right? So education, diet, physical exercise, smoking or alcohol, right? Genetic factors, you may have heard of ApoE4, which is a mutation that predisposes some of us, right? Not all of us, to heart disease as well as potentially brain disease, right? And then there's these systemic factors, which kind of means in your body, right? That's the kind of medical word for like what is going on in your body, right? So that might be something like high blood pressure or hypertension. There may be some dysbiosis or imbalance in your microbiome, the gut flora, the bacteria in your gut, or there may be these metabolic issues, which encompass like high cholesterol or maybe high blood sugar, diabetes, pre-diabetes, right? And then like heart health, yeah? And so all of these things then go on to influence the brain, causing perhaps not enough, blood perfusion or not enough oxygenation, maybe leakage in the blood-brain barrier, which is a barrier that helps to protect our brain against exposure to certain chemicals or molecules that can be damaging. I'm not going to go through all of these, but ultimately that leads to the accumulation of this pathology or the tissue injury in the brain that we see, which is the amyloid and the tau. So you've probably heard of these proteins that accumulate in the brain and cause, we're not sure if it causes, actually, we're not sure if it's the cause or if it causes, right, the injuries that we see that then subsequently lead to dementia. And I will say that, the burden of disease in the brain from these kinds of protein accumulations don't always match up with the symptoms that we see, right? So bear that in mind. What we're seeing in terms of, visual images doesn't always translate to function. And that happens all the time in medicine, all the time. We see people who have a lot of clogging of arteries in their hearts, but they don't have any symptoms of heart disease. Or we see people who have a lot of accumulation of injuries in their spine, whether it's herniated discs or whether it's bone spurs or arthritis or whatever, and they don't have any symptoms in their spine, or the opposite, right? They have a totally normal looking scan and they have a lot of symptoms. So that's not always a perfect match. Okay, so you've probably seen these kinds of statistics before about how dementia is an impending crisis in the sense that our population is aging. And if we continue with current trends, what we can expect is that this is the year 2023. What we can expect is that in about 20 years' time, the population of people who have or are living with dementia is potentially going to double. Okay. And really, this slide to me is really interesting because it's just a little bit dated. But what I want to say is that if you look at this little red line down here, this is actually how much funding there is for dementia research. So even though the problem is going to sort of astronomically rise in the cost, which is these blue bars for, Medicare, we actually don't have the same level of funding. We don't have the same level of increase in terms of funding. And that's a big problem, because if we're not researching and looking for the solution, then it's going to be harder for us to manage this impending crisis. So this is just a introduction to the idea that there is a continuum when it comes to dementia, and particularly Alzheimer's dementia, which we've defined over years of observation, right? So if this is sort of normal aging of the brain, right, and this is dementia, you can see that there's a gap. So this is as you age, the number of years, and this is your cognitive function or how your brain is working, and that decline over years. And what we're seeing is that before the onset of dementia, there's this phase called MCI, or mild cognitive impairment, where somebody may have some memory issues, but they're still able to take care of themselves, still able to do their activities of daily living, dressing, feeding, toileting, and so forth, right? But then as time goes on, we can see that the deterioration is more rapid. So there's a more kind of exponential loss of function. But there's also this fairly long sort of preclinical phase. And what we're finding now with some of the biomarkers or early detection is that we can see there are some changes of dementia in the brain early on. I also want to just back up for a moment and just say Alzheimer's disease is such a complex disease. It's still a bit of an enigma to us. I don't need you to understand all the things going on in this slide because I don't understand them myself, right? What I just want to say is, look, there's so many factors at play, and we don't even know if Alzheimer's disease is just one disease. In fact, most experts agree that it's multiple diseases. And what I wanted to show you here is that there's at least, like this particular theory, is that there's maybe at least 4 different diseases that Alzheimer's eventually is going to be divided into, some of which have to do with blood sugar metabolism, some of them have to do more with genetics, some of them have to do more with the immune system, right? And you may have seen in the last few months, right, in the last year, there have been a number of new drugs that have come to market that are, you know, intended to treat Alzheimer's and target this amyloid protein in the brain, right? There's aducanumab, lecanemab, right? And what we're seeing with these drugs is that while it's very exciting that there's these new breakthroughs, because there haven't been breakthroughs for almost 20 years, right? While it's exciting to have these breakthroughs, what we're also seeing is that there's a lot of side effects that we find worrisome, like brain edema, meaning that there's swelling in the brain as a result of these drugs, sometimes hemorrhage or bleeding in the brain, right? So when we remove some of this amyloid beta, right, it's not like that's a benign process. The brain does react to that. And so we're not sure if these are going to be, you know, able to be used by everyone. And that's how science works, right? We find something, we try it out. We saw this play out during COVID, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. It doesn't always work for everyone. There's always a trade-off in terms of side effects, right? And what I want to say is that this is just these are just the first 3 of like many, many, many other drugs that are in the pipeline, right? And they are what we call disease modifying drugs, right? So that's this green and then this purple area. Look at all of these drugs that are potentially going to be coming to market, right? And what you can see here is that the FDA, right, requires phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 to check for safety, to check for effectiveness before they will allow a drug to be approved. And you can see here's aducanumab, here's lecanemab, donanemab, right? And so there's, right? So these are the first 3 of many other drugs that are coming to market, which is very exciting. It's very exciting that we have all of these drugs that are potentially going to be available to us. And what it reminds me of when we think about drugs, sort of, we're looking for that silver bullet, right? We're really looking for what is the one drug that's going to cure Alzheimer's for us, right? And what I want to suggest to you is that it's probably not going to be one drug. It may be multiple drugs, right? Because it reminds me of back at the beginning of my training, and even before that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right? We were talking about the cure for cancer. Remember that? We're going to have a cure for cancer, right? And then the more research we did, the more we found that cancer is not one disease. Cancer is so many diseases, right? It's so much more complicated. Look at all these different kinds of cancer that are out there, right? And as we found out more about cancer, we also found out that we actually have a lot of other tools that we can use to treat cancer: chemotherapy, radiation, target biological drugs, right? And so it's very exciting because there's a potential that we can find many different treatments. But I want to say that treatment versus prevention, like treatments aren't available to us just yet, but prevention is. And all of this research that we've been doing on cancer, you can see, has shown us that actually 40% of cancers can be prevented through lifestyle measures like smoking, obesity, right, alcohol, and so forth. Lifestyle plays a critical role in cancer prevention. We all know that now, right? But wait, 40% of dementia is also preventable. And these lifestyle measures actually overlap, right? So you can actually prevent cancer and also help yourself with dementia and help yourself in terms of preventing heart disease or diabetes. You can take that early action now, right? Because we have data that shows that 40% of dementia cases can be prevented. This is a graphic from USC that shows that these are the things that can potentially help us in terms of our brain health. And these are the things that can actually harm our brains, right? So things like having hearing loss, things like high blood pressure, obesity, smoking. Notice some of these are the same things that we saw in the last slide, right? And we know that many of these things also affect heart health. So I wanted to just put in a plug for my friend Barack Gaster, who runs this program called Cognition in Primary Care. And here's the link for that. It actually provides wonderful information for treatment of, not treatment, for prevention, right? And also helping practitioners who are dealing with families that are asking these questions. Does my loved one have a brain aging disease? Do I need to worry about it, right? You're noticing some cognitive changes. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how we prevent dementia, okay? And what I want to say is that dementia is a lifespan disease, right? So I think of it as being lifespan. And what I really want to do is to, right, think about it, lifespan, health span, brain span, right? We really want our brain span to be equal to our health span, equal to our lifespan. Really, that's our goal here with these preventive practices. And these are just a few of the many, many different things that can impact our brain and can lead to Alzheimer's or dementia, and things that we can potentially work on, right? And as I said in that earlier slide, we're finding now that there's actually a preclinical phase for Alzheimer's. So the pathological changes, the beta and tau, probably already present in my brain because I have Alzheimer's in my family. My grandmother has Alzheimer's, right? And so I'm pretty sure I have some of those changes in my brain already, but I know that those can be in there for 2 to 3 decades, and I can go on to never develop Alzheimer's because I have built up enough cognitive reserve for myself, which means that I have found a way to make connections between my neurons that go around where there may be plaques or where there may be tangles, right? And currently we estimate that there's 47 million Americans that are living with preclinical changes in their brain right now. That's this gray curve here, right? So if we look across the age span, we can see these blue parts are like people who have actually been diagnosed with dementia. The orange ones are what we call prodromal, or that mild cognitive impairment. And then these gray sections are like people who have changes in their brain, but they may not end up ever manifesting with symptoms. And early detection is possible now, right? But when you find that you do have these changes, or maybe you don't even need to know, right? Will you take on that preventive health, those healthy habits for your brain now? Like I know that I have calcium in my arteries because I've done a scan and I've looked and I see I have calcium in my coronary arteries. Doesn't mean I'm going to have a heart attack. Doesn't mean I have to have a heart attack or heart failure or any heart problems at all, because I can intervene now to make sure it doesn't get worse, right? To make sure that I'm doing the right things to take care of my heart. So how do we know that these preventive practices help? I'm just going to go more quickly through these slides now because I want to give Kelly some time to talk about nutrition and how it really relates to brain health, right? So we know, for example, active diet, cognitive training, social activities. How do we know that? It's because there's this study that came out a few years ago now, 2020, where there's, they took a number of people and they basically had this multimodal intervention compared to placebo, and they found significant changes when they intervened actively to improve these people's lifestyle, right? And the results were really striking, right? 25% overall improvement in cognition or thinking ability, 40% improvement in memory, 60% reduction in other chronic diseases, 150% improvement in processing speed and executive function, right? These are people who were at risk for brain disease. And now this work has been taken up by so many other countries because this is a problem that's global. This is a global problem. This is not just right in North America. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Your Brain. So this is my approach. And what you'll find, I call these the brain health multipliers, because there's certain things that we can do for our physical brain, right? And the things that have been the most studied and are the most robust are actually come down to very simply sleep, move, eat, right? So nutrition is a key piece of that, obviously, but sleep and move, exercise are also very important. And there's a number of other things you can do, like, make sure you have good hearing aids and, things like that, and manage your heart health and blood pressure and cholesterol and so forth. But when it comes to brain health, I want you to focus on these three first, because these are the foundational pieces. And without these three pieces in place, it doesn't matter how many supplements you take, right? All of that is less important than these pieces. And my goal here is to get you to be healthy of mind and body at your 100th birthday. And so the other pieces I find are actually really fascinating, and we don't see this very much, is this linkage between sort of like, what are we doing in terms of personal growth, in terms of what we can do to manage a lot of the stressful kind of thinking that we have, like the monkey mind that's going on, the self inner critic, right? So a lot of that is mindset work, right? In this mental piece, resilience, building up habits, so we can make it easy for ourselves to do the right things for our health and our brain, right? And then the purpose and connection piece, right, is about sort of how do we connect with other people? How do we engage in the community, right? Kind of like, how can we live our life, not just about ourselves, but about the bigger community, right? And find meaning and challenge and continue to learn new things to stimulate the brain to really build that neuroplasticity. So for those three components, right, I have like these different matrices that I talk about, like the sleep, move, eat, right? And the different things in there. I'm going to let Kelly talk more about the eat part, right? And then I talk about mental, right, resilience, habits, mindset, which is about beliefs, and then the emotional cultivation, which is such an important part of stress management for us, right, is really managing our emotions. And then this connection piece, or sorry, this purpose piece, which is about connection, right, challenge and meaning. So I'm not going to go into a super lot of detail here because I want to get to the nutrition piece, but you're welcome to learn more about that on my blog. This is, back to my slide about Mom Your Brain, and how if we can focus on the right-hand slide here, where we're really taking care of our brains, making our brains a good master, our minds a good master, right? As opposed to, good servant, as opposed to a bad master. And I want to just summarize our key takeaways, right? Brain health is the sum of our overall health, our current and then our future health, right? Preventive practices. Dementia is a lifespan disease. It's not too late. It's never too late to start improving your brain health. And while we don't have a cure for Alzheimer's right now, we can prevent up to 40% of cases of dementia through lifestyle. Engaging the power of your mind to protect your brain is the key to being healthy of mind and body at your 100th birthday party. Okay. I'm just going to end with the Blue Zones, which many of you may have heard of. It's collaboration between National Geographic and the NIA, and it's basically where they've studied the places in the world where there are the most number of, I'm going to call them, ultra long-lived people, right? 80, 90, 100-year-olds, right? Okinawa in Japan, there's Greek Isle, there's, many different places in the world where we've studied what are the things that people do to help their brains, right? Move naturally, have a purpose. Here we go again, right? Like many of the same things that we've talked about before. And this is a really great piece to also look at. So I want to thank you for your attention, and this is how you can read my blog if you're interested. You can also find me on the socials, and I will take questions at the end after Kelly. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. That was such a rich presentation, and I've just been thinking about how you started it with your grandmother, and just really hoping that she has a speedy recovery. And
Got a little more emotional than I thought I would.
well, it's a very personal and emotional situation, and so I'm just thinking about you. So thank you for sharing that, and also thank you for sharing so much of the work that you're doing and how you organize into these different categories of how we can support nutrition or support our brain, because I think about how nutrition is one piece of this. I think obviously it's mostly what I do, and so it plays a big part in my life and my career, but I do like to take a step back and really look at all of the different things that we can do to help support our brain. And so in this section that I'm going to be talking about, I want to take some of those pieces and talk about how we translate that into what you might eat. So how you take it from nutritional science to what might be on your plate. Nutrition is such a powerful tool for brain health, as well as the other aspects you talked about, the physical activity, the social connection, the stress management, movement, relationships, all of those things are so very important. So as we're going through these slides and talking about some of the specifics, maybe what you can do is think about and evaluate some of the things that you're doing, you're eating, and maybe think about a few things that you might want to modify. And it's all about taking steps in that direction of greater health, of building your cognitive reserve. And I also like to think about this aspect of synergy. So Dr. M, you talked a lot about how when we're taking care of our brain, we're also taking care of our body. And when we're taking care of our gut, we're also taking care of our brain. So everything is interconnected. And so I think that's such an important message that, you know, we're going to be benefiting overall. Just like in the finger study, they showed a 60% reduction in all chronic disease. So that's one of my favorite things about nutrition, is that synergy, that one recommendation might help multiple aspects of health. All right, so I'm going to do a share screen. All right. So I wanted to start with looking at, you know, what is the active diet, maybe some more specifics about what that active diet is for prevention of dementia. And so you can see here that it's based off of this Nordic dietary pattern, and it has to do with eating an abundance of fruits and vegetables, whole grains instead of refined grains, keeping the sugar intake low, lower fat meat and milk products, de-emphasizing animal proteins and eating more plant-based proteins, looking at the quality of fats in the diet, having fish at least a couple of times a week. These were the parameters of the diet. And then they also looked at making sure that there were specific nutrients that were abundant, and vitamin D was one of those. This slide I'm not going to go over, but this is an example of the specifics of that fingers diet. And as you can see here, as a dietitian, I help to translate these percentages and these grams into, you know, what your meal might look like based off of this. So you can see a little bit more of the specifics if anyone's really interested in the data. This is here that, you know, you can take a look, you can screenshot this and think about how you might want to apply that. But let's go ahead and take a look at the specifics here, because there are multiple dietary patterns that can be helpful. And so we can look at the dietary patterns that people who are very long-lived, like in the blue zones, what they're eating. There is the Mediterranean diet. There is the DASH diet, which that one is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. And then there is this dietary pattern that was introduced in 2015 as a collaborative study out of Harvard and Rush. So this is a Mediterranean DASH diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay. So essentially, or sorry, it's looking at decline in brain health and how diet can play a part in that or help prevent that. And so there's a lot of similarities to just following the Mediterranean diet, but one of a couple of the specifics with this Mind diet that make it different are that it included lots of greens and also berries. Some of the similarities with the Fingers diet, the blue zones, and some of these other dietary patterns that have been shown to help protect against cognitive decline. Almost all of them have lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. They're including whole grains, so minimizing the refined and highly processed foods and grains, having fish, decreasing those animal proteins. And then this was also discussed in the Fingers diet, but it's very clear in some of the other ones, especially DASH, looking at lower salt intake. The research on this dietary pattern, and also if we look at the Mediterranean dietary patterns, we can see very, very similar. The Old Ways Foundation is an excellent source of information about a Mediterranean dietary pattern, lots of great recipes. One of the things I really like about the Old Ways Foundation is that they have a bunch of different models for following the Mediterranean diet, so it doesn't have to be quite so Euro focused. We can take more of a multicultural perspective and look at Latin American, their Asian, African heritage, many different dietary patterns that have similar aspects. So you don't have to just be eating Mediterranean foods in order to help prevent, or Norwegian foods. If we're looking at the Fingers study, you can really apply these dietary patterns to multiple cultures. But the similarities between them, including those whole grains and the fruits and vegetables and such, that's what we really want to be focusing on. The fruits and vegetables rises to the top for almost all of these, and also for other types of prevention diets, including for cancer and heart disease, for longevity in general. And everybody would think that a dietitian would say you need to eat your fruits and vegetables is probably one of the most obvious recommendations. However, there's more to it than just that recommendation. If you look into the science, one of the things I find really interesting about eating these plant-based foods is that they're very high in phytonutrients. And so some of you might have heard that term before, bioactive compounds. And these are compounds that you find in the colors, flavors, aromas, and also the fibers of plant-based foods. And they do so many amazing things to help support our health. So they help protect our tissues. They are anti-inflammatory. They can help support our microbiome. They help with cellular regeneration. They can help the body to eliminate toxins. They help to upregulate enzymes in the liver that help our bodies to process things that we might be exposed to. They do so many different things that it's no wonder that they really rise to the surface in terms of what is important for protecting our bodies. They also have nutrients, vitamin A and vitamin C, magnesium, calcium. Some of these studies will break it down and look at some of these specifics and show that diets that are higher in these compounds are associated with lower rates of dementia. So one of the things you can think about is how many fruits and vegetables do you eat? Is half your plate vegetables? Can you think about when you're eating a meal that you might have one cooked and one raw vegetable, or have at least 2 or 3 colors on your plate? There's lots of different ways to do this, but by far it is one of the most powerful ways to protect your brain and your other body systems. The other thing we can think about is what counts as a serving. So I think it's really easy to look at a plate and say we're going to do half the plate as vegetables. And if you have digestive issues, you might want to do vegetables that are more cooked than raw. And you can take a look here and see the different serving sizes as to what counts as a serving. So in these studies, many times I would say they're looking at between 5 to 9 servings per day of eating fruits and vegetables. And, you know, we're coming into the season now where there's lots and lots of options. And so it is a great time to be thinking about how you might increase the colors, the flavors, aromas. Herbs and spices also have these bioactive compounds that are so protective as well. So think about your own diet and how many fruits and vegetables that you're eating. Go to a farmer's market, look at maybe even picking out some fruits and vegetables that you haven't tried before. So bringing in some novelty and variety, that's just going to increase the nutrient value of your diet. Fats are a big topic in most of these diets as well. And when we're eating highly processed foods, many times fats are damaged or highly processed. And as Dr. M was saying, our brain is mostly fat. And so we do need to make sure that we have really nourishing fats. When we eat fats, they get incorporated into our cells. That influences how hormones and neurotransmitters interact with our cells. And it also influences whether we're making pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory compounds in our body. So many different ways that fats can affect our health that it's important to think about the quality. And so there's a few different ways we can do that. One of them is by looking at sources of saturated fat. And it's kind of a reductionistic way to look at. Nobody just eats saturated fat. Even if you ate a stick of butter, which maybe your mind went to that, it's only about 50% saturated fat. So we have to think about the total dietary pattern and the different types of foods that you might be eating. And typically we find high saturated fat in meats, especially red meat and processed meats, full fat milk, butter, cheese, and cream. These in the Western diet, that's where you're going to find a lot of those fats. And when people eat a high amount of saturated fat, that can be more associated with those problems with hormones communicating with cells. It can also increase the risk for diabetes and heart disease. And we know that both of those metabolic disorders are also associated with decline in brain function. So keeping those foods to a minimum, and we already saw that with those dietary patterns with the Mediterranean, with the Ming diet, with the Fingers diet, the blue zones, they're all keeping those animal proteins and foods to a minimum. And actually, we do have one blue zone in the United States, and that's in Loma Linda, California. And that is in a population that is mostly vegetarian. So it's in the part of the state where they have a lot of people who are Seventh-day Adventists. And so they're vegetarians. So keeping, obviously there's many different aspects to what keeps people healthy. And in the blue zones, looking at those different like community aspects and physical activity and all of that, but their diet is very low in animal protein. And that's something that shows up over and over, that more of a plant-based diet is protective. What are the fats to choose? So this, you can think about the different types of fats that you might have in your house or the foods that you might be eating. Nuts and seeds, olive oil, fish, avocado oil. These are some of the fats that are associated with brain health, and they're more unsaturated. So they're going to not cause hardening of the arteries. They promote more health in the cardiovascular system. They promote better blood sugar balance, and they promote better brain health. So these are the ones that you want to prioritize. Sugars and how much sugar that you eat is also really important. And so exposure to high amounts of sugar can raise your blood sugar, can raise your exposure to insulin. Dementia, especially Alzheimer's, has even been called type 3 diabetes because it's a metabolic disorder where it's more likely if people have diabetes or blood sugar problems to have a greater risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. So one of the things we can do is really look at how much fiber we're taking in. So choosing carbohydrates that are really high in fiber, thinking about, you know, does the label say 100% whole grain? Are you eating things like oats or whole wheat or farro, spelt, quinoa, buckwheat? There's so many different types of whole grains, wild rice, legumes and beans. Those are also extremely high in fiber, really great for your microbiome. They're really great for balancing your blood sugar. and then some starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes, winter squash, purple and red potatoes. Those types of foods have lots of fiber in them. If we're thinking about sugars, so all of these diets actually do recommend limiting sugar. And so as a guideline, we can take a look at, a label of different foods that you might eat. This is a label of it's a beverage, and you can see here, if you look at the serving size, it's 8 ounces or 1 cup. We can look at the total grams of added sugar. So the labels recently changed, so they actually included added sugars now. And these are the ones that we want to be really careful about. So this includes 23 grams of added sugar. And if we know that 5 grams is a teaspoon, that's about almost 5 teaspoons of sugar in 1 8-ounce serving. So you can look at the label of different foods that you might be eating and kind of add it up and say, for this portion of food, would I want to eat that much sugar? We want to try to keep the added sugars under 50 grams. Some organizations like the American Heart Association recommend less. I think added sugars are something that are good to keep as low as possible. There's not really a nutritional reason to add sugar. And so you can get the carbohydrates that you need by eating carbohydrates that are higher in fiber. And so I included some ideas here to give you some more ideas about or some recommendations around lower fiber and then higher fiber swaps. So if you like pasta, having whole grain pastas, there's so many great legume-based pastas now, like lentil or chickpea pastas. So those are going to be very high in fiber, also protein. Buckwheat pasta or soba noodles. You can also do zucchini noodles or hearts of palm pasta. There's a variety of different ones that are out there. If you're eating white bread, you can try whole grain bread, or looking for 100% whole grain. So back here, I showed you this kind of label is often included when it's 100% whole grain, because sometimes it'll say whole grain, but it only have a portion of whole grain on the label in the food. So looking for 100% whole grain will be a good choice instead of white rice, brown rice, wild rice. I do want to say when I'm making these recommendations that I recognize that there are cultural practices and different reasons why people eat different foods. And so if brown rice is not part of your traditional diet, there are lots of other ways to get fiber in your diet as well. So it doesn't have to be an absolute that you can never eat any of these lower fiber foods and be healthy, but thinking about different ways to add in fiber so that you do have a good balance. If you're drinking fruit juice, trying to eat more whole fruit. If you're eating things like pretzels and chips and ice cream, trying some different alternatives. If you're wanting something crunchy, maybe some nuts and seeds. We know those are associated with greater brain health. Edamame or roasted chickpeas, those are also great. Instead of ice cream, you can do frozen fruit or sorbets, looking for the ones that are lower in sugar. So these are a few of the swaps that you can try. And then when you're looking at a label of something that might be a grain product like a cereal or a bread or a pasta, look for the dietary fiber on the label and try to find those that have a little bit more fiber. If it says 1 gram or 2 gram, see if you can find the highest fiber that you can. Many times cereals and breads will have 5 to 7 grams of fiber, and that would be an excellent choice. Sweets can be really, really challenging, as I mentioned, and so I think it's nice to have some options of sweets that maybe have something to offer. So they taste sweet, but they're also a great source of protein. They're a great source of those healthy fats that are really brain protective. And I think maybe I'll see if we can send these out to people, because you might not be able to write them down as we're looking at it, but I wanted to give you a couple of my favorite recipes. These chocolate walnut brownies are so incredible, and they are made with walnuts, some cocoa powder, which is a great source of bioactive compounds that are anti-inflammatory. It has baking soda, salt, and then it has a couple of eggs, a little bit of maple syrup, and some vanilla. So easy. And then you can top it with fruit. And it's just a delicious sweet treat that also, it's not overly sweet, but it gives you the benefits of those walnuts and having those nuts and seeds. And then I have this recipe for cookies that are made out of oats and garbanzo beans. And if that sounds a little strange, just give it a try. It's actually, I think they're really good. And it's also a cookie dough that you could eat as well. It's very healthy and very low in sugar and high in fiber. The last concept I wanted to talk about was fasting. And so Dr. M did bring this up on her slides, looking at different dietary patterns that can be helpful for the brain. And so, this could potentially be a big topic. It is a really hot topic of research, looking at all the different aspects of how limiting food intake might be helpful for longevity and also for brain health. So one of the aspects of fasting that can be helpful is it can reduce inflammation. It can increase some of the mechanisms in our body that stimulate growth and repair of cells. It also increases something called autophagy, which means it helps our body to clean up cells that might be dead or damaged. And then it can also improve insulin sensitivity. So with going a little bit longer without food, it helps to reduce our exposure to higher levels of blood sugar and insulin. So lots of really interesting metabolic effects of fasting, but it's also not right for everybody. So it's not right if somebody is losing a lot of weight or has a really low body weight, or if someone has unstable blood sugar or low energy, or if somebody has a history of an eating disorder. I do think it's important to work with a dietitian or somebody that can that has been trained to help you to make sure that this is the right pattern. There are many different ways to do it. As you can see in this image here, there are people who might fast a couple times a week. And even with this periodic fasting, it doesn't mean maybe they don't eat anything, but maybe they only eat 500 calories on 2 days, or maybe just alternate day fasting. I think the most popular is what's called time restricted feeding, where people might extend the overnight fast, or they might finish eating a little bit earlier, so that maybe they're eating within, an 8 to 12 hour window and avoiding food the rest of the time. And then there's also some really interesting research out of UCLA, and Walter Longo is someone who has kind of pioneered some of this, called a fasting mimicking diet, where you're actually eating some foods that help to keep you in a fasting state, but the balance of the macronutrients are you're still eating, but only not a lot, but you're still able to eat as opposed to completely fasting. And you might do this once a month for 3 months, and then you might do it like quarterly. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So it's probably good to work with somebody to figure out what's the best route for you. But very interesting and up and coming, I think, probably more beneficial for metabolic health, like blood sugar and heart disease and such, not maybe so much for weight loss, but it's something to keep your eye on in terms of how it can be helpful in the future. This is a slide that just shows you a few resources if you wanted to find more recipes. So the Old Ways Foundation I talked about previously. Eating Well magazine, I love this website. I talk to people about it all the time. They actually have a Mediterranean diet section of their website. So many videos, recipes, tutorials. You can sign up with your email, and they'll send you like emails periodically that say things like, 21, 1 pot meals for a Mediterranean diet, or, so just something to keep you interested in new foods to try. There are a number of resources for the Mind Diet. The Mind Diet there's a bunch of books for both Mediterranean and Mind, but these are some people that are dietitians who have written books. For whole grains, the Whole Grains Council has great recipes, and then the Bean Institute has really great recipes for beans. And if you are interested in finding out if you're meeting some of those ratios, like if you're a data person and like to see some of that, I really like Chronometer. It's a free tracking tool. You get more features if you subscribe to it, but they do have a free aspect of it where you could actually keep track of what you're eating, and then you can see if you're meeting some of those ratios for the fiber and some of those different nutrients like vitamin A and vitamin C and magnesium, and looking at how much sugar you're eating and some of the different types of fats, whether you're getting enough of those healthy fats. So this is probably where some people start to think, oh, this is too complicated about food. But if you do like data, this would be a tool. And if you're wanting to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, you can certainly think about it as a plate model. So is half of your plate vegetables? Do we have, maybe like the handful of the grains? Are we having maybe a handful of the proteins? And are we doing plant-based proteins? Are we eating those healthy fats? So thinking about those food components and how you can get those in for greater brain health and overall body health. So hopefully that gives you a few ideas and resources to look into this a little bit more. And I think it's important to also think about the aspect of it being delicious. So don't lose sight of that in terms of trying to be healthy, because that's something that can be really motivating too. So I think what we can do now is take some questions.
So I have some questions that were in the chat, and I can read those out. One was, what do you recommend in terms of minimizing mercury in seafood or arsenic in rice and grains?
I can say that the Monterey Bay Aquarium has some really good resources for not only sustainability, but also for mercury in seafood. And if you're trying to reduce mercury, I would also recommend choosing fish that are from Arctic or very cold water where there's not a lot of industry, and then also smaller fish because they don't concentrate the mercury quite so much.
Great. And another question is, do frozen fruits have the same nutritional value as fresh fruits?
I would say yes. I think that when vegetables and fruits are frozen, they often are frozen pretty quickly. So there has been some studies that show that they retain their nutrients.
Great. And another is nutrition. Please give some nutrition suggestions for populations who are food insecure.
There are a number of resources for the food insecure in Seattle. And so I'm not sure if people are from all over the country or from mostly in the Seattle area, but there is, if you go to the kingcounty.gov website, there's actually, and I can actually just pull up a couple of links that I can put in the chat for people. There are benefits. The supplemental nutrition program, the SNAP program, offers money every month for people that helps with food assistance. And there's a program called Fresh Bucks, where you can get some vouchers to buy vegetables at farmers markets. And in South King County, there's also a grocery store that is a free grocery store where you can go shopping, and it's absolutely free. So I'd be happy to put some resources in the chat for some of the, yes, and someone put in the chat that many of the farmers accept SNAP and EBT benefits.
Okay. What do you think about Dr. Ludwig's always hungry approach? My sister is feeling great on it.
Do you want me to take that one? Okay, so is it so Dr. Ludwig or Dr. Lustig?
I'm not sure. It says Ludwig in the chat. Jacqueline Darroch, would you like to clarify?
Yeah, it's Dr. Ludwig from Harvard. He and some colleagues had a recent article in one of the big journals. It may have been New England Journal, suggesting some changes in the balance of especially weight loss and anti-inflammation. Let's take this another time.
Yeah, I might need to, I mean, I'm not as familiar right off the top of my head, but yeah, I think, I mean, if he's a researcher from Harvard, I would imagine that he's got good credibility. And so, yeah, I think we'll table it for now, but I would say it's probably a good thing.
And there are a couple more questions if we have time for them. There's 3 minutes left. How do you test for ApoE4 gene?
I'm actually going to defer that question to our expert, Tom Grabowski, who's here from the Memory Institute here at the UW. I say here, but really it's there. We have different testing mechanisms in Hong Kong, but Tom, I think most of the people are there in the US, and maybe you can address that one, if you don't mind.
I mean, it is a test that your doctor can send out. We at the University of Washington, we send these out to a reference lab in Utah. You can also, a lot of people become aware of their ApoE gene status through 23andMe or some similar service as well.
Great, thank you. And what is your go-to cookbook if you have one?
Oh gosh, do you have one, Dr. M?
Do I have a go-to cookbook? I don't know that it's a cookbook. Food book wise, I just really like, so Richard Isaacson is a really well-known researcher in prevention, dementia prevention. And I'm trying to remember the name of his book, but he has a food book, and I feel like that's a really great resource. Basically, Andrew Weil from the University of Arizona has written many dietary books and some on brain. And so I guess those would be probably my go-to authors. I don't know about you, Kelly.
Yeah, I tend to use books a little bit less, although I did have a few that were in my slide set. Like there are a few different ones that are listed there for the Mind Diet. I really love the Eating Well magazine, such great recipes. And also the Old Ways Foundation, I think, is really great. Our past culinary director at Bastyr has a really great book called Feeding the Whole Family that has so many different whole foods-based recipes, plant-based recipes. And she also has a YouTube channel where she has she does improv comedy and cooking. And it's called Cookus Interruptus. So you can see so many great short videos, cooking videos. So those are some of the ones that I really like a lot.
Great. Dr. Maj, do you have any closing words?
Sure. Well, wow. What a presentation. Dr. M. Kelly, it's a lot of information, a lot to think about, and I think all of us find something that resonates with us and how we can improve our life to protect our brains. So that being said, I want to thank everybody who actively participated, were present here, and that was our first actually presentation. Our next one that's next month will be a little bit more interactive, and we'll have a cooking session together. And I'll be talking a little bit about gut and brain, and then our chef will be cooking. We will be sending out the recipe when you register, and I'm very excited. But also remember that Kelly will be having a presentation in July, and she'll be talking about meal planning and brain health, optimizing brain health. So some of the talks and some of the points that she made today will be getting repeated in that session as well. So if you didn't have enough chance or the opportunity to take notes, definitely there will be some overlap on the material. Kelly will be having more time on that month to answer the questions. But again, I wanted to thank you, Em. I know that it's your working day in Hong Kong, and Kelly for making the time doing this wonderful presentation for us. And thank you everybody for attending and joining us tonight. And looking forward to our next seminars for next month. And with that, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much.